Welcome back to another episode of Crash and Chug. In this episode, I have Nina Guerra, founder of Rustic Ranch, Texas. I apologize in advance. The camera during our discussion stopped recording about 30 seconds through, so I spliced in some drone footage of her place as well as some pictures that she provided. So sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation on your way to your favorite trailhead or on the way to work. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. And if you don't want to watch the video, you can check us out on any streaming app. Welcome back to Crash and Chug. Thanks for listening. This week we have Nina Guerra here, and so she's the founder of Rustic Ranch, Texas. Is that correct?
Rustic Ranch Equine Assisted Therapy.
Okay.
For short, Rustic Ranch, Texas.
Okay. So I've been following her page for a while, and we reached out, and she just moved back to the area, and I was very interested. Of course, as people know, one of the big things I want for this platform is to address things like with mental health, and one of those avenues. Of course, there's not like one path to the top of the mountain, so to speak. One of those avenues that for veterans, which she's a Marine Corps veteran. She just got out
November of 21,
so fairly recent. So, and then she's starting a nonprofit, which is Rustic Ranch, Texas, which is a question.
Equine Assisted Therapy.
Equine Assisted. I can't even say it. You heard what she said. Yeah. So it's one of those things I was fascinated in. One of those things that always trying to get better at and understand is, obviously horses have been part of the human, companion for thousands of years. And then when the automobile came around, we kind of just, threw them to the side, which is kind of sad. But anyways, enough about me. So I brought her on to kind of dive a little bit more deeper into that and talk about the veteran nonprofit that she's starting up. Luckily and fortunately, she invited us out yesterday and we had a long conversation. And it's crazy that we grew up so close together. That's pretty wild. But with that, can you kind of give us a little bit of background, like, how you came to understand this, like your background with horses and the word I cannot say?
Yes, Equine Assisted Therapy.
Equine Assisted Therapy. Look at that.
Yes,
I got it.
there you go.
Like you're teaching me something.
So I am Nina, Marine Corps veteran. I was a signals intelligence analyst. I grew up here, born and raised in San Antonio, so here in the city. Kind of like what we talked about yesterday too, predominantly all Hispanic household, both sides. So I'm second generation. All three of my grandparents came from Mexico, and started out the American dream here. Now here we are. With that being said, our family was kind of split. Like I said, my parents had me and my brother very young. So we spent summers with my grandparents, and one side of my grandparents, he grew up on a cattle ranch, so we would go back and visit his family often, and that is kind of where I found what I didn't realize then was an escape from the city, from home life, from definitely the alcohol abuse in the Hispanic culture, which again. Then growing up, that was just the norm. I didn't realize it then. But I knew when I was out there, is a small town called Woodsboro, Texas, near Corpus. When we were going out there, it was like I knew it was going to be a good time. That side of the family didn't really drink. It was very wholesome. And I just felt very I couldn't even give you the word then. Now it's therapeutic. Then I didn't know. I just felt safe. I felt safe. I didn't have to worry. I was kind of just stress-free. And with that, that's kind of that's what planted the seed. And every chance I got, able to ride the horses down there, work with horses before I joined the military, I would do that. Then I joined the military, and everywhere I was stationed, I would seek out stables to just clean the stalls, groom the horses, things like that. For a very short time, I was active duty stationed in California, and I was also a respite care nanny for children with autism, because I thought in my field of psychology I might want to go into that. And that is when I found out I would take one of the young girls that I was watching I would take her to her therapeutic riding lessons, and I saw them kind of bringing the human horse connection together. Something that I kind of knew was there, but now they're putting, like they're putting it into practice. And at that time, I really it was for children with disabilities, physical or mental or behavioral disabilities. And that again got me thinking okay, I was already an undergrad in psychology. So I was just got the wheels turning of what I could do. And for me, leaving San Antonio, I never wanted to come back to the city. I knew that when it was time to get out of the military or down the road, which it happened a lot sooner for me. I you were there at my ranch yesterday, 25 acres. That seemed to me, that was oh, that's something I'll do when I'm retired,
right.
50, 60 years old. So even the fact that I have this property now, it's still just surreal.
Right.
But that's kind of what got the wheels turning. I'm okay, bringing using horses to kind of treat people in any way. So that was my first duty station in California. And ever since then, I just made it a point to wherever I was at, I knew I wanted to be around the horses even more. Now fast forward to summer, July of 21, last year. I was about to get out of the Marine Corps. I was doing an internship for pre end of service, the Skill Bridge program, if any service members are familiar with that. And I was well, what am I going to do next, kind of thing. And at this point, I finished my master's in psychology, counseling, and I knew I was going to start applying to grad school in December for my PhD in clinical psychology. And again, I knew that going into the field of psychology, I knew I wanted to do nonprofit work, but for me, that was when I'm done, in life,
right?
A retirement career in a sense. But now here I am. I was you know what? One day I just got really frustrated all with the lack of care that I was receiving in the military. I got really frustrated with social media norms. I was just very mad at one day, and I was this is bullshit. We're not doing enough for mental health. We kind of hit on this yesterday. COVID surged this mental health kick, but it turned into this social media therapy, telehealth therapy, TikTok therapist kind of thing.
Right.
Which, not to take away, I know that some of these people are licensed and they're feeding really good tips, but we're still getting further and further away from connecting with one another. And that was again, all of it all at once. Also me, what's next kind of thing. I knew I was going to go to grad school, but I guess that just wasn't enough.
Right.
And I felt I wasn't if I'm over here complaining in a sense, well, what can I do? And that's kind of what prompted Rustic Ranch Equine Assisted Therapy. I knew the therapeutic value in horses, the human-horse connection, and the horse serving as a mirror. And then I started doing some research on it and what's out there, because I knew I couldn't be the only one thinking this. And sure enough, I actually got there. I was working in Charleston, South Carolina, and I got in contact with another nonprofit who actually they're not veterans, but they offer equine assisted therapy for veterans. And at that time, I reached out to them just to kind of volunteer, I had been doing. Excuse me.
How dare you?
And I wanted to just volunteer. I didn't even want to go through the therapy. And I started talking to the founder, who's a psychologist, licensed psychologist, and she was well, if this is something that you want to do, why don't you go through the program? And I was yeah, I'd love to do that. And they follow a method that's called the Agala method, which is all just groundwork. So you don't ever ride the horse. You just you do different obstacles and you lead the horse to do certain things. And it's them me. It's the horse and I kind of communicating. The therapist is off to the side, and she intervenes when necessary or when I have questions. It was a little bit different for me. I had been to talk therapy, and again, that just wasn't for me. I don't want to. I'm more of a it was too structured for me.
Got you.
So as I started thinking about okay, I'm going to be that therapist one day. So I started thinking about what I want to incorporate into my program kind of thing. So that's kind of what got me a little bit more like the wheels started turning a lot more with the Rustic Ranch. At first it was just an idea. Then I went to the therapy and I was like, yeah, hell yeah, this is exactly what I want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
I see the work that can be done. And unfortunately, great therapist, like she's served as a mentor. She wrote me a letter of recommendation for grad school. Great person. But there was still that like, she's worked with veterans, but like she never understood what it was like to like sign your life away in a sense and like go serve your country and all of the nuances. Like I don't like even just talking with you and Sandy, like I can just speak. I don't really gotta like I don't think that we throw out a lot of military acronyms, but you know, it's just like I would say things and I would have to expand further on it and just small nuances. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but like, and I'm like, I just don't feel like veterans should have to do that. So for me, I'm very passionate about like this program, this organization being by veterans for veterans. Like who better like to help each other than other veterans? So that's kind of what I was like, no, I really need to be doing this. I want to be doing this. Because even being here in San Antonio, like Military City, USA, I just think about I think about how busy the city has become. Because growing up,
fucking nuts.
It was crazy. Coming out here from where we grew up in the city, that was like, we were going far.
We're going out of town. Like, get your passport.
Yeah,
you know?
It's like, are you like, man, all the way over there? Like, you better leave early. And it's like, are you going to come back today?
Yeah.
And like, really, and like now you just zoom through the town. So it's like, I'm like, man, like, there's so many veterans in the city. It's like, what are they doing to disconnect? And as I was looking for property, I knew this is the community I wanted to serve. I wanted to give back to my community, being the veteran community and the Hispanic community. And that's what predominantly South Texas is.
And it's so crazy, like in the sense of, because this is Texas, right? I remember when I was in Germany, and people had the misconception that we all rode horses, like the locals, you know, like, you guys all ride horses, and I was like, no, like what are you talking about? But it's just that stereotype, right? Because they think Texas, they think horses, but with that, you don't. Like, you would think there would be more services for, like, you know, for, I can't say the word, but for what you're, like, help me out again, please.
Equine Assisted Therapy.
Equine Assisted Therapy. At the very least, it's going to be sinking into people listening.
Oh, yeah.
Equine Assisted Therapy. So with that, you would think there would be more opportunities for veterans. And I know you spoke yesterday that there are programs that do so, but they're far and few between, and then they're also like limited in the sense of helping those with special needs, which is great. You know, there's obviously and to go back to your point, as a society, we're not doing enough for those with raising awareness for like mental health. We're not doing enough as for those kids with special needs or people with special needs, and kind of go back to your point. Also about like social media, like I know they're trying to fill a gap, but at the same time, there's also a lot of people that are trying to market it in a way where they, you know, they're trying to make money off of it, and I get that there has to be a little bit of both, right? But at the same time, it's like with healthcare in general, we kind of start missing the mark when we start become too much of one side and not the other. But with that, it seems that there should be, especially being in Texas, there should be a lot more opportunities for the therapy that you're providing. And it's crazy, like if you think about it in the sense of, and crazy is probably not the right word, but it's wild, like to think about like you were almost, like the way it came to you, this purpose, it's always like you're almost like meant for it. You were brought up with it. You saw how it contributed to benefit you in the way that it did, you know, to kind of bring you out of the environment that you were in as a kid. And so many of us that grew up in that type of environment and were able to have that outlet and then circle back all the way to, I don't know, 25 years or so, approximately. And then understand that, and then to have the understanding that what am I doing or what am I not doing, and what can I do to try to better sister's problem, because it's real easy to bitch about things, right? It's real easy to just cast the blame on everything and blame everyone. But I think one of the things you may have picked up, and this probably is always something that's been in you. I don't want to give the military too much credit, but there is also the self accountability. Like, all right, I can bitch about it all day, but what am I going to do about it?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because as a leader, when you're going into the commander's office, you can't just come with problems. You got to also come with solutions, to back that and provide recommendations or COAs like to the commander or whoever's in charge. Hey, this is what I think. But it sounds like instead of you kind of just complaining, you actually chose to do something about it. And I mean, I forget how you came into my purview as far as your Instagram page, but I just kind of started like following. I was kind of starting up this podcast, and I was really trying to find people trying to do good things in the community as well as like with the veteran community. And that's kind of like how we kind of started. I reached out to you on Instagram, you reached out to me back, and then we kind of just started building this rapport. And then yesterday I thought it was fantastic because I got to see the property. I got to see, like, I don't want to say I've got participated in everything, but it's kind of like I got to see, like, the idea kind of grow into it. And it's like you just hit a major milestone in that with attaining the property. And then like to hear like like part of your vision of what you think it should be or what you want it to be. And I think that's amazing because and I don't want to kind of go too much. I don't want to steal too much of your thunder, but at the same time, like the approach of not having, like, identifying what you didn't like in the care that you're getting or not the care that you're getting, and understanding like that you don't want it to be structured. So with that, you're kind of taking the lessons learned from your experience and then applying it to your vision going forward. And with that is I don't know. It's kind of like the program I write with the Dirt Therapy Project. It's therapy without therapy. You know what I mean? It's like the art of war without war. You know what I mean? But it's like approaching it in almost like a Taoist approach where I think it says like when you, that's probably not a bad, but it's just applying the right amount of structure without the structure and allowing to happen organically.
I really, that word stuck out to me yesterday because I think either you or Sandy said it, and I'm like, that's exactly it. Like I kind of talked about, like as we were walking through the property, I'm like, just us talking, we were just talking about, like I was talking through the vision, and then we were just going back and forth. I'm like, that's exactly how I envision an initial consult, whether that's somebody who wants to volunteer, whether that's somebody who is like ready to seek out care, or if it's somebody who's just wants to somehow get involved. That's how it would go. Like, all right, let's walk the property. Let me show you what's going on here. And I enjoy, like, I don't do it on purpose even, but like we even talked about like just being very empathetic people. So it's like naturally I have people tell me this all the time. It's like, man, like I've never shared these things with anybody. Like just in friends, I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, man.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I just like I ask the right questions, but then people are like, oh, I tell them I'm studying psychology. Like, oh, like you learn how to use leading questions. I'm like, I'm not that far in the field, but no, that's exactly what I want it to be. Don't get me wrong. The structure, these like 6-week, 8-week, 16-week programs of therapy, I get it, and it will work for some people. I don't believe it will work for some veterans, the majority of veterans, because it's like, well, what's next? We go through these 6-week, but how do you sustain everything you've learned? Where's the accountability? And there's nothing wrong with accountability. It's like, okay, you've been through this program, so it's like, now let's get you plugged back into the community. Where can you, like, there's these young kids, there's this struggling single mom, and like, oh, you went through this in the military, which like, so that's where it's like you go through this program and then how can you plug back in and how can you continue to serve the community kind of thing.
But I think that's very important because that's one of the things I experienced in the sense of, so I went through multiple, as I talked about yesterday, I went through multiple different programs, right? And it's not something, when I say it, I still have this air of like, because I allowed myself to get there. So there's that part of it. But there's also like the the conditioned idea that, what other people might think about when I say these things. But at the same time, it's important that I do express them. But when I went through inpatient, and when I made the choice to go into inpatient, when I made and then accept and then buy into the whatever I was learning, because obviously what I was doing wasn't working, right? The old methods that I learned as a kid, growing up, drinking, whatever, and like all that stuff didn't serve me well. But once I did that, I understood, like, all right, well, I'm here to learn some shit, so like let me put my ego to the side, because you have to do that. It's ego death,
Oh, yeah.
You have to buy into the program. You have to, especially I did it as a senior NTO. So it was just like that ego I had to fucking put to the side. But as a leader, it was like, I'm telling all these people to go get help, that your career's like not worth it, if you're dead, it sounded great, but what the fuck was I doing?
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't recognizing the things in my own life because of the idea that we talked about earlier. Like you're conditioned to take care of others and then put yourself last. And there is a time for that, but also it's the cliche that they say, like, you can't, like, if you're on a plane and the oxygen goes out, if you can't, you can't help others if you don't have your oxygen and put your mask on, or something along those lines. But with that, once I kind of learned the first, tools or whatever, it was scary in the idea, because you're brought up in this bubble, right? And like everything's protected in there. You're on other veterans. You got each other's backs in there. You kind of learn to be around them. They learn to be around you, and vice versa. It becomes like a family. And I'm still in contact with some of these folks. But with that, when you're leaving, you're just like, shit, now it's about to get real. Now I'm about to go back into the environment where, I have to do it on my own. So, to a certain extent. But with that, it was like, all right, well, how do I start applying these tools? How do I, but it's also understanding, like, when you're going into it, like, it's also like when you are kind of, I don't want to say branded, when you're kind of put in the box of like PTSD or PTS or whatever it is, bipolar, or whatever it is that they categorize. I can't speak this morning. Categorize. Thank you.
No, just real, like since I've been back to San Antonio, I'm like Spanglish all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
A friend called me this morning and he's like, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was like, yeah, ahorita estoy un poquito ronca. Like, he's like, what? Like, I'm like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So like with that, so it was like, how do I do it on my own, right? How do I get out? How do I, and start applying these things? And then I went through a couple of different programs, right? But it's also like, there was one thing that I don't know how I was aware enough to understand this, but when they gave me this label, right? PTSD, TBI, whatever that, that they, categorize you as, I had the awareness to understand, like, okay, I'm not that. I hear what you're telling me. I hear what you're saying to me, and I hear that, but this is temporary. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. And that, I think that helped me, because when I started to transition out of it, I understood also that this was a temporary thing. And I could see very easily how you could accept that diagnosis, and that becomes a part of your identity. And I mean, there's different nuances that people kind of project after that, whether they accept it or not, right? Mm-hmm. And with that, it was also like, all right, well, since this is temporary in my mind, somehow I knew that. All right, well, I need to start doing it. And I was, no bullshit, I was a little scared, because I didn't want to go back to where I was, and I didn't know if I could do that. Like, just with drinking alone, like, I went around the same circles, and it was like tough to. When they first saw me, they didn't know where I was. A lot of people didn't know where I was, right? And it was to go back into those circles, and they knew me as, as a person that loved to have a good time, drink, like made people laugh, And I didn't even know if I could be the same person in those circles, Like, can I still be funny? I'm not saying I'm the fucking funniest person on earth, but like, there was that was part of my identity. Drinking, that's what I grew up in. The military, 20 plus years. That's what it was. That's how we bonded. That's how we, confided in each other. There was a lot of things around that. Like there was a lot of rituals, traditions around that. But I allowed it to consume me. I allowed it to become my identity. And then when I had to put that to the side, when I decided to put that to the side, there was a lot of that, like, all right, well, how am I going to do it now? Because I used to use it as a quote unquote medicine, right?
Coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism in crowded spaces, in environments, public spaces. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until I went to therapy and until I started to, they started highlighting it. And it was really the other veterans that I recognized that in. You talk about mirroring with the horse, right? And that's what it was. Like, you hear other people's stories, and it's just like, even though our experiences are different, the symptoms are all the same, right? And how we deal with it is we're all fucking doing the same thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I said yesterday. I'm like, alcohol is the only legal coping mechanism we really have.
Right.
That's it. It's the go-to to drown out whatever mundane bullshit or just deal with shit.
Right.
We have to. It's like, that's it. And it's celebrated,
Yeah,
Like you go to a function, it's like, well, can we bring alcohol? Will
right.
there be alcohol there? Because that's the only way I'm going to go through this, deal with the command kind of thing. It's like...
Yeah, and I used to say stuff like, if anybody ever made me quit drinking or whatever, I would never have saw myself to be able to put alcohol down. And I would say with a sense of, I don't know, pride.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It's like, now I'm like, I'm not going to fucking quit drinking for what?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to make me do that.
Yeah. And I say that also in the understanding, I'm not it doesn't matter what the substance is. I read a book and it talked about I've said this before, but the difference between a poison and a medicine is the dosage. Did I say that right? Poison and medicine is a dosage. Yeah. So with that, it's also alcohol or any thing you put in to cope with something. It could be a medicine. It also could be your poison. And too much of anything is a bad thing. And with that, it's also so my point is, to get back to your point, I'm starting off on a fucking tangent, is that we have to learn and understand that these tools that we're learning, whether my fucking Spanglish, help me out again. Equine
Assisted Therapy.
Equine Assisted Therapy. I'm going to practice that when we're done.
Yeah, because there's a misconception. If you say equine therapy, well, horses get physical therapy done on them.
Got you.
So it's it could go either way. So equine assisted therapy is just the horse is assisting in the therapy.
And that's perfect. That's a perfect, I don't want to say metaphor, but I guess maybe to a certain extent, because all these programs, all these tools are assistance. Mm-hmm. It's up to each individual to use that assistance and apply it to yourself. Take what it doesn't work for you and take what does work for you and put it into practice. It's doing the work, right? We talked about that. And that's real big. I posted on Instagram, I don't think some of the people that really understand what that means, because it's do the work. It's taking accountability for yourself, applying whatever tools, lessons learned from other, negative situations or positive situations, apply them to yourself, and owning your shit, right? Owning, and that's one thing I also, okay, I'm going off on a tangent, but it's owning your shit, right? That's one thing I used to hate, when I would drink too much, and I would used to say this, maybe it was a one-off, to kind of give me a ticket out, but it was everyone has the opportunity to be the asshole that night.
Yeah.
And that was true. And sometimes I was the asshole. I would either go off on somebody or I would just be too much of something. Yeah. And it was just, I hated the next day having to apologize.
That's kind of what I said yesterday too. I'm just I took that year and a half to stop drinking. But before that, same thing. It's no, Nina, she'll go have a drink with me.
Yeah.
She'll probably get fucked up with me. Yeah, easily. And then now looking back, I'm God, why did y'all let me do that?
Yeah.
But it was me, I knew, I then I would go through those, like, it would happen, right? Like, oh, I have to apologize to some people. Like, I fucked up. I acted too much of this, blah, whatever, right? And then I would go into these, like, little, like, mini, like, pity sessions where it's, like, this, like, feel and just, like, wanted to shield myself because it's, like, damn, like I would go to the extreme and, like, God, I really fucked up. Which is, like, kind of normal, right? Everybody is the asshole a different night. I just felt like maybe I was being the asshole too many times.
Right.
But even then, like, I still didn't really, like, really cut it out until, like, I felt like I had to cut it out. So, you know, but like now, like we were talking yesterday, it's like I never thought that I would ever have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I was like, dang, I must just be destined to be an alcoholic because that's what I was raised in.
Right.
And even then, like, even then at the worst, I would say, like, no, I'm not an alcoholic. But abusing alcohol, yeah, that was definitely the norm for the majority of my military career up until, like, maybe the last year and a half.
Right. And you say, like, abusing alcohol, right? But at the same time, it was touted, right? Like, damn, you can hold your own.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah. And that's so funny because it's like, like, as we discussed before about, like, how, like in the signals intelligence field, like, it is a white male dominated field, and being a Hispanic woman who was like, I'm just an overachiever, you know? So it's like, yeah, I wanted to get those opportunities. I wanted to be the leader, and I was the leader, but with that came, like, more responsibilities than the average my male counterpart encountered than I did. You know, it's like we were not the same. We didn't deal with the same stressors. There were normal stressors, and then there were my stressors because I was a woman in those positions. And with the drinking, it's like I'm 5 foot right now, like 137 pounds, then like maybe 105 foot, 120 pounds. And yeah, I wanted to drink just like the 6 foot, 200 pound dudes.
Right.
It's like, I'm not
so you were like
200 pounds.
And that's something, like, I mean, as a man, like, I didn't really consider when you guys were having that conversation yesterday. I can appreciate it, but to a certain extent, you know, I'm a little bit more empathetic when it comes to, like, women because I grew up with 4 sisters. So that involved, like, me with a lot of conversations, me having to fight for them, you know, literally, you know, when people would fuck with them. And with that, it was like, so I'm a little bit more empathetic than some men that haven't been, you know, raised with women or what have you. My mom was a dominant figure in my life, you know, like I guess most males, but my dad was away working a lot, so my mom had a huge impact. But she was like a dude, and I hate to say that because there's a certain extent, right? Why can't she be like a strong woman, right?
Right.
But, you know, she would talk to me like a man would, you know, like, you better not hit a fucking woman ever. She would talk to me like that. She would curse a lot. That's probably why I curse a lot. But with that, it's so I had like a different appreciation for it. Like, you know, when you and Santa were talking about having to elbow your way in. So with that, it's like alcohol, right? That's part of it, right? You're like trying to check the box. You're trying to, I don't want to say overcompensate, but in a way you are, and almost in an unhealthy way to do so, just to kind of like, because I remember people that wouldn't drink with us or wouldn't, like, they were kind of, I don't want to say outcasted, but they didn't bond with us in that sense. Yeah. And I don't think it was, I don't think I did it intentionally, but it just happened that way because when we drank, we kind of, you know, just bonded over that, right? And with that, it also kind of came when opportunities came or whatever, we understood somebody a little bit better. So we would, you know, in whatever way that it was. And I'm kind of fumbling over my words because I'm like processing. I'm like, fuck, did I do that? Like, did I, you know, not with women in general, because there wasn't a whole lot of women in our career field, just because of the we have to climb poles, we have to climb towers. So it was like very like labor intensive digging trenches. There were women, but they were very strong women physically. You know, I'm not saying women aren't strong, but the tech school weeded out a lot of them because they couldn't climb like physically, you know, up gaffing up poles or anything like that. But with that, it was just so I'm kind of my mind's kind of going there, but
And I mean, as a woman,
right,
as a leader in the Marine Corps, I know that I've done that to other people as well, you know, because like I would like alcohol was part of like the overcompensation, sure, but then came the stress. So then came more alcohol to deal with the stress and deal with like the expectations, because like I set myself up for that. And it's like if I fail, everybody notice like, oh, you're not being yourself. It's like, well, it's fucking hard to be like this all of the time. Like,
yeah.
But so it's like, it was like a roller coaster, and it was the same thing. Yeah, like I know, like looking back, I'm like, damn, I was the enabler, right? Like, yeah, no, let's go get fucked up. Like, let's go have a good time.
And then talking shit to people, right?
Yeah, and talking shit
I'm
to
saying
people.
that because I used to do that.
Yeah, so it's like I acknowledge it. I only take I take responsibility now for my actions and the way that I was coping then. But all I can do right now is like take that and learn from it. And like I know, like, damn, that put me in a place that I don't ever want to be in again. That wasn't me. And honestly, sometimes I think about this often. I'm like, all these people that I've met and who've come in and out of my life, I'm like, they'll never see like the real Nina. They've got this version of me that was like I was just fucking trying to survive, right? Trying to deal with shit.
Right.
And like now I meet people and I'm like, I genuinely want to help people. That is what led me to even studying psychology, like the mentorship and counseling in the Marine Corps, like setting, whether that was like, for us, it was a lot of like, when I first joined the Marine Corps, we could either do pull-ups or like the flex arm hang. And I just started doing, I went in doing pull-ups. So a lot of like the other girls would be like, how did you do that? It's like, all right, let's set up a plan, right? Let's go do this. And I enjoyed setting up the plan and seeing their progress. I really like the mentoring aspect of the military. And that's what led me to psychology. I'm like, I love helping people. I thoroughly enjoy it. And there were times where I was really good at it. And then there were times where I was really bad at it because like it got to the point to where like I'm so overwhelmed. I'm just trying to stay afloat with like everything, all the tasks that are being thrown at me, and got to the point to where like I'm no longer mentoring. Right now I'm like having to push that onto other people, like mentor other people to mentor others.
Right.
So I kind of got away from like that, small unit leadership in a sense, and started doing things like I went on a lot of like individual augment type stuff where it was just me supporting different things or different missions. But then that's when I noticed, like, once I got away from that, like, one-on-one, that's when I felt like maybe that my relationship with alcohol was its worst, because it's like I have no accountability, like no one to check me. I'm just thrown into these environments. It's like I know I have to like maintain this sort of like standard or this, and if it got too much, then yeah, that's how I would cope. 100%.
Right.
That was my coping mechanism. And now looking back, like, again, I'm just like, wow, I can have one beer and like,
yeah,
that is it. Like,
yeah, like, and the word I use around it is like I respect it now.
Yeah.
Graham, I'm not doing it right now because of the program I'm on, but with that, it's like for me to kind of just have one beer and be okay with it, or maybe two, and I'm like, I'm good. It's strange because I never thought I would be in this position to have that choice. Not to say that, and there's different levels of alcoholism from what I learned. I thought it was just like, you had to have it every morning, but no, there's like different levels, and that's one thing I learned in therapy. But with that, like, is there something that kind of like happened? Was it just a series of things that happened in your life that just kind of led you to, hey, I need some help? Or was it like what was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, that kind of made you realize?
Yeah, it was just a series of things, like failed relationships and like putting myself in position, like vulnerable positions, and like I felt like being taken advantage of emotionally, like I noticed the patterns, and I'm like, is this it? Like, is this how it's supposed to be? Where like I go through this cycle of like meeting people, like a lot of the relationships were established, friendships, romantic, all based on alcohol, and and they were all just like ending terribly. And like it was taking a toll on me emotionally, because I'm like, dang, like I'm investing in these people, and it's like but it was just, honestly, I think I would just call it a cycle of like toxic patterns, toxic behavior. And I just took like, I felt very, I guess it was after like my last deployment to Afghanistan in 2020. I was there, and like when I came back, I just didn't, like, I don't know, I guess it just all hit me at once. Everything. Like my entire career, my entire life.
Right.
Like it was
It
just
all
like,
came to a head.
Yeah, and I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like,
Right.
I know that I am like, this is not who I am, you know? And I just felt like I wasn't myself. I had felt like I was like so far gone from myself.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just kind of like, it made me like think back into like my entire career. Like I was even going to like, dang, like, did I even have a success? I knew it was coming to an end the following year. I was like, do I have anything to show for it? Like, do I even have a successful career? Am I even really good at my job? Like all kinds of like questions, like just kept coming up. Like, dang, like did all these people, and that like has to deal a lot with like my own anxiety as well. Like, I wonder what all these people have thought about me through the years. Like I thought about all these like just people.
Yeah.
Like
I've done it too. Yeah.
And it really just all hit me at once. And I was just like, there's just, and going back to like even like talking about anxiety, like that was, I just thought I was really stressed all of the time. And that was what just came with being a leader in the military, right? Like learning how to manage your stress. And I wasn't. I was just masking it with alcohol. And finally, like, yeah, I was like, I'm studying this as well. Like, I know there's an entire manual called the DSM-5. That's what therapists use to diagnose.
I'm shaking my head because I remember filling out those. You do it before every appointment, you know, like, yeah.
And I mean, all of those, right? Like even like pre-deployment, post-deployment, you do those like mental health check screeners. No. And I really looked at it and like, I'm like, yes. But you don't say that stuff because it's like, oh, you, like for me, I, like my security clearance, like it's a very common misconception that if you seek out mental health, you're going to get your security clearance pulled. And that's just false information. Like, and I've seen leaders like tell, while I was still in, like leaders say that to young service members. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not true. Like you,
in the sense that it will not be taken away?
That it would. That like if you seek out mental health, you're not going to get to go on deployments or training
that happened
events.
to me.
Well, there are circumstances where it will. And one of those is harm to others and self-harm.
Right.
But now we're just talking about going to seek out a therapist to talk about life, talk about common stressors, helping identify triggers and establish healthy coping mechanisms. No. That's healthy.
Right.
That is like what I said. Like therapy is personal development. So if we're just talking about those things about triggers, unhealthy coping mechanisms, like if I had addressed the fact that like if it clicked sooner, when I'm very stressed, for me it was not, again, like undiagnosed, not understanding anxiety very much, just the difference between anxiety and stress.
Right.
Stress, you go back to your norm. Your cortisol levels drop and you're back to your norm. Anxiety is a roller coaster of just heightened cortisol levels up and down, and it never, if it's unmanaged, it very seldom, you very seldom go back to that baseline. So then like, I didn't realize that like, oh yeah, those times where I'm the asshole that night, I had like major tasks to meet that week. We had major events coming up. Like I was inundated with stress, and that was my way of managing it. Had it clicked for me sooner, had we had more conversations like this, you know what I mean? Like maybe I would have sought out a lot sooner, like what can I replace alcohol with?
Right.
But no, that was just the norm. So in that sense, just talking about general stress management, anxiety, talking about things like the signs of depression, anger management, interpersonal communication, that's all things that a therapist can help you identify.
Right.
Now your security clearances are not going to get pulled for that.
Right.
Harm to yourself and harm to your others, that's when, yes.
That makes sense in my case.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but that's a common misconception. They just say, oh, you seek out therapy, you seek out a therapist, you seek out mental health.
Right.
No. And that's kind of like helping. I kind of lost track where I lost track of where I started with this conversation, like
you're
with this
good.
thought, but that is like the thing that's like, I made it a point too, like when I started seeking out therapy and started just talking about it. And over the years, even looking back, right, I was in the positions of like getting, like recommending younger service members to go on deployments, like, racking and stacking, if you will. And it's like, dang, there were a lot of people who got thrown out just because it's like, oh no, they might be going through too much at home. And it's like, but we never once like talked about like how maybe this deployment or this training exercise would benefit like the individual. We never bring them into those conversations. We're over here making the decision for them, which don't get me wrong, sometimes that's how it has to be. But, we never take it into account, like, their perspective on it. Like, hey, or like, we don't want to address it. Like, hey, I know there might be some mention of, like, maybe you're going through a divorce, right? But we just don't really want to talk about it. And I say this now, too, like, as I'm going to start my PhD in August, and they told me that, like, I would be the only veteran in the program, and I'm the oldest veteran in the program. Like, I'm only 30.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, but I will have even another 30-year-old who did not serve in the military. I will still have more clinical experience. I have more clinical experience now than people who are already in their PhD programs. Because at like 23, a young 20-year-old leader, 22-year-old, 23-year-old leader, now I'm helping people like go through divorces and like talking to them about like general hygiene and like finances and buying a car, like things that's like, wow, like very invasive, but it's like, what did I also know about that? I've never been married. What did I know about helping someone through a divorce? But I mean, I succeeded the best that I could, utilizing the resources that the military offered, providing that, bridging the gap, and then just being there, being that empathetic leader, like, hey, no, I don't know what exactly you're going through, but like, let's talk about it, kind of thing. And I could only do that, like I was only one person, but emotional intelligence is not taught in leadership. Maybe we'll start talking about it more, but that's what it comes down to, being self-aware and understanding yourself to better help other people. So kind of, sorry, tangent, but with that, I was like, same thing. It's like, dang, we tell these young service members, these are the resources and go seek out help. But like, when do we actually ever utilize them ourselves? So I just figured like, you know what, if I have to do this now, I have to do this for myself. I have to talk to somebody about this. And I like I said, I had kind of already known like the manual, right? Like I knew kind of, I had dealt with anxiety, but I was very in denial. I'm like, no, I'm just stressed out. It will fade.
Because there's a part of it also is the compartmentalization that you're taught, and you have to. I mean, it's important that you learn how to do that, even in life, because there are situations where you don't have time to process what's going on. Like, all right, I gotta put that shit to the side. I'll deal with it later. But then when we get in the habit of doing that, it becomes all too convenient because we don't want to face whatever it is, and then you keep throwing that shit in the closet, and then eventually that door gets kind of like. And
that's exactly where it was for me. That was like my point. I'm like, I was so compartmentalized internally, so far removed from my own emotions that I was like, to me, I was a very different person. Then that was like my breaking point. I couldn't stuff any more shit in the closet.
Right.
And that's what unfolded all of this. And then I realized like, yeah, like the emotional, like the question, like that you said, like also it's like, oh, how are you feeling today?
Right.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm alive. But like putting words to your emotions, like happy, sad, upset. Why am I upset? Why am I a little bit overwhelmed right now? It's like, those are not things that I ever thought about.
Right.
So it's like 10 years of just being very high strung, but being high strung and being an overachiever worked because I was getting shit done. I feel like I had a very successful career. I got to do a lot of things that most people in our job field don't ever get to do. So I'm very proud of that. But it definitely came at a cost.
Right.
That now I'm just realizing, like, okay, that it didn't have to be that way. So, like, just trying to take that decade of my life and, like, apply it to this new decade of my life. And in turn, it's like lessons learned. Like I said yesterday, I'm past the point of learning things the hard way. I want advice. I want to hear people out. You know, I check my own ego. I don't know it all.
Right.
I want to hear people's stories. I want to hear what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And in that as well, like that will allow me to help other people.
Exactly.
When I have the full picture.
And that's kind of this podcast is one of those things. It can share experiences and, you know, lessons learned, and hopefully it gets to the right people to hear it. But like, to go back to what you were talking about earlier, and I think what kind of got us off like what we're talking about, just to kind of give us, is I asked you like what happened and what broke the straw.
The straw that broke the camel's back.
Thank you. I say that all the time, and it just I fumble on words. But with that, it's also like, you know, I know you say like 10 years, but what I'm learning from myself is like, as I'm opening up all these boxes within my military career, I'm also like, it can't just be that. So I start going into my, you know, upbringing, and I started realizing, like, I was doing crazy shit prior to the military, you know, and then I think about my environment, and I think we minimalize our upbringing because it just was what it was. And with that, it's like, but no, like if you talk about child development and those key stages when things happen within the life, whether it's security or like, you know, witnessing something, you know, I had to factor those things into my life because it made me the person I am today, right? But with that, you know, so it's also like, yeah, it's 10 years for you, but, you know, you go back, you kind of highlighted a little bit of your childhood. With that, it's also kind of made you who you are, like, to this point, and then also affected you to this point. So there's the good and the bad of it. And I'm still doing that, you know what I mean? And I'm also kind of like, I'm not recognizing it from the standpoint like, oh, I feel sorry for me, but it's like, holy shit. Like, I experienced all that. And like, as like I told you yesterday, like, I didn't realize that I grew up in quote unquote, I say this, but until somebody else showed it to me, like because I was stationed, my first duty station was here, even though I was rarely ever here because I was TDY a shit ton. Was, you know, it took somebody outside the state, really, here from Washington, to come to my house where we surprisingly found out yesterday we grew up pretty damn near each other. And they're like, shit, dude, you live in the ghetto. I was like, the fuck? You know, like, what?
It's like, no, you haven't been to the South Side.
Yeah, like, what? You know what I mean? But yeah, it's just like, I didn't think I had it that bad, but it just what it was, you know what I mean? And like growing up, I remember having to lay on the floor, you know, because of drive-bys, because, you know, I fuck around and I say, like, we didn't have GPS back then, so they shoot up the wrong house sometimes, you know what I mean?
But that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, but, and then, like, seeing, I kind of talked about it yesterday, like, seeing people OD, seeing people, I saw one person, he was running out of the, and I asked my sister this, I was like, did I witness this, or am I,
or did you
like,
just
talking out of my
hear
ass?
it, and
Yeah.
now you're,
yeah, because you got to do that, too, because the way we remember things are not always the way they happen. So with that, I asked my older sister, because she was with me, like, hey, did I see this? And what we saw, because we grew up right by the ditch, El Diche or whatever, and we saw a guy running up, like, stumbling, right? And he was, like, he was bleeding. He had I don't know what's to call them, like the tank tops, the white tank tops, so they call them also a white beater. It's kind of fucked up, but that's
I've always thought about, like, why do we call them that?
Yeah, it's fucked up. Yeah. But you know what I mean? I say that and I kind of cringe a little bit because I'm like, fuck that. Like, knowing what I know now, that's a fucked up name for a word. You know? I mean, for a shirt.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to get canceled after saying this. Cut that out. No, but that's just what it was, right? I mean, I'm not saying that we should still call it that. Anyways, let me move on.
The white tank tops.
The white tank tops. Thank you. So with that, it's I saw him running out and he was bleeding, and then a lady was coming up behind him. So maybe it's kind of fucked up because she had a broken broomstick, right? And apparently she stabbed him already once with it. And maybe that's why, ironically, because the shirt we would just said, maybe he did do that.
Maybe. Yeah.
And she fucking stabbed him and he died, like, right in front of us. I was probably like 4 to 6 years old around there.
Yeah.
And I remember it was right on the corner, my parents' house, right across the street. I remember seeing that because we were playing kickball, you know, like you just roll the ball and kick it, you know, from a baseball. And I remember experiencing that, and like that's just what it was, you know. And you know, my parents were there; they're always working. we saw that it was hot. You could smell it. You could smell the blood on the street and stuff. But I just kind of like threw it, like, just, that's just what it was, right?
That was a
norm. But
yeah.
And then fast forward is just like, did that contribute? And obviously, what I know now, yes, it did. It contributed to like my worldview of what I thought the world was, and it makes sense to all the crazy shit I was doing, like speeding and all kinds of stuff. And then that kind of carried over in the military, fighting, drinking. You know what I mean? It was just like the cycle, like that we talk about. We kind of hit on that yesterday. So with that, it's also like, yes, you had 10 years, but it's also like the culmination of a lot of different things.
Yes, absolutely. And that's kind of what, like, I can talk about my military career because it's like very common, right? Like, to abuse alcohol. These are common things.
Right.
And we talked about it yesterday, how I said, like, you were asking me, like, anything you don't want to talk about. And I'm like, no, because, like, I'm actually getting to a point to where it's like, yeah, we need to talk about our childhood. Not to say, like, I love my family.
Right.
But like we said, it's like, yeah, it was a norm to see them, like my uncles, my dad, my grandfather, abusing alcohol, and being emotionally and physically abusive to their wives and their families. Right. That was normal. And it was like kind of like we all knew it was happening, but we would never talk about it with each other. That was just what they did, what happened.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, they're it's kind of like we would go to family functions, and like for me, I guess this is where my own anxiety started. I knew that when we went home, like, it was going to be a shit show, So I was like, that was never fun. Like, yeah, we were like, I had some cousins and we would play. It's like, I didn't want to fucking play because I'm like, no, like, because it's going to be, you know what I mean? Like, my dad's going to overdrink. He's probably going to overdrink with my uncles. They're going to get into something. And it's like, that's not fun.
Yeah.
And, but at the end of the day, like, I love my family. Mm-hmm. They like, yeah, I didn't know I grew up like, yeah, the west side of San Antonio. No, I thought the south side was ghetto. Right. I was like, no, we don't live in the south side. We don't live in the south side or the east side. And we're good here on the west side, down in Set Alvo, down for General Buckmullen.
Right.
But it's like, and I've told you, like, now I'm starting to talk, like my brother and I, we talk a lot more about our childhood. Mm-hmm. We talk, my aunts, they're more like my sisters, and we talk a lot more about how that affected us and why we are the women we are today. And it's not to bash them, to bash our family, to bash my upbringing at all. It's to, like, at some point, like, do we stop these generational cycles? Mm-hmm. Do we stop these generational curses? And that, I think that's the biggest thing, is like, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
Right. Like, now we're talking about generations of, like, trauma and trauma responses that are being passed down. Mm-hmm. And again, as adults, like, yeah, we can identify, but there's people who will blame, right? Oh, well, this was my childhood. This is how I was raised. Right. Like, at some point you have to take responsibility as well. Acknowledge it and take the responsibility so that you don't fall into those.
Right.
And I felt myself falling into that, with the abusing alcohol. It's like, fuck, like, is this who I'm supposed to be?
Right.
And it got to the point, like I said, I never thought I would be here in my mental health journey or my relationship with alcohol. I never thought I would, ever. And so it's like a surprise. Like, don't get me wrong, I still get very anxious. I still get, like, very, like, I have these little, like, like mini panic attacks where, like, I kind of, like, explode a little bit. Like, maybe I'm, like, saying, like, saying the wrong thing, like making other people feel like normally with my family, like I said, like, that's where I feel like really stressed out, right? Because it's like, I feel like they don't understand me, right? Because, like, I'm trying to do this work, but it's really hard to apply it when it's like, then they're like, they don't really understand the work that I'm trying to do.
Right.
But the only way that I can get them to understand it or share it is by talking about it. It's like, hey, yeah, no, I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm just going to go do this. Or, like, no, it's fine. Like, or also, like, just saying, like, asking for help. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like, I was in Charleston recently and just moved back from there. And I felt that was the only time in my life, I was there for a year, the only time in my life that, like, I felt, like, alone, like, really on my own. I didn't, like, I usually, like, everywhere I'm stationed, like, I make friends, like, I meet people, like we hit it off. Like I'm like I'm a social person. Like people like me. But there, like I was kind of telling you yesterday, it's like that's the only place I've ever experienced like any sort of discrimination or prejudice, like to where people are looking at me different. And I found myself in like restaurants. It's like, dang, I really am the only brown person in here.
Right.
And I've never really thought about that. I would never give that a second thought. So I was having a really hard time because I've never even been really homesick since I left home. And I felt myself like, I'm home. Like, I want to go home. And I knew what I was coming back to here with the property and the nonprofit. But that was like a real mental health journey for me being there, because it's like I didn't have anybody that like I could have these conversations with. I didn't feel comfortable even with my coworkers. Like I just didn't feel comfortable talking to this because I felt like there's no way they could understand, like they would understand me. Maybe they would. I didn't give them the opportunity. But yeah, and I remember I called one of my aunts like crying one day. I was like, I hate it here. And I told her like, thank you that like if we hadn't started laying the groundwork, if I hadn't started to open up about my own mental health, and we wouldn't have broken through our own relationships. Like it would have just been like, you know, like, how are you doing? Like, oh, that's good. Just very surface level. But like, since I started to like break that barrier, if you will, break down those stigmas and stereotypes, now it goes deeper. It's like, I can talk to her about those things. And not only that, her and I have very similar childhoods. Because her brother's my dad.
Gotcha.
But, so it's like, now we can talk about those things from childhood that may be affecting us now. And so that's why, like, I've 100% found the benefit in vulnerability. You know, we talked about yesterday a little bit about how it's like a lot of people view vulnerability as a weakness. And I'm starting to understanding vulnerability and how, you know, being vulnerable can be used as a strength. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my own, and it starts with my own family because I am very family oriented and close. And I found that like, yeah, it's a lot easier for me to just say that I'm overwhelmed or stressed or having a bad day, other than like when I try to mask it, it doesn't go well because it still comes out in other ways, you know. Then I'm being like ugly and like, damn, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk to you that way.
Yeah, and it's also like, you know, we talked about accountability earlier, but owning like, you know, my bad, like not like because you can only say my bad so many times until you start, like people stop believing you, you know. So it's also like minimizing those my bads or whatever, and like no shit, like making changes, you know. And it's hard to kind of look at yourself and make those changes, especially like you know, as a like in the male culture, that's what it is too. Like you talked about like people not wanting to be vulnerable. It's also like with that, because I've heard some males talk about, you know, that it's going to look like weakness, right? And I get that, but also there's like a time and place for everything, right? And there's also the understanding, like, you know, we had talked about different versions of ourselves. Like when you're in the military, and you apply it now, right? Like as a leader, when you're on certain phone calls, you can kind of pull out that, you know, version of yourself. I think Ram Dass talks about it like as suits, like pulling out different suits. And so you're pulling out that leadership, like it's time to be aggressive, stern, and what have you, if you need to. And then you put that back in. You can be the compassionate side. You could be, and as men, you could do that too. Like I could probably be vulnerable right now in this second where we're talking, but if somebody were to like step to me, then I can pull that out and, you know, pull out whatever is needed, like the Swiss Army knife, if you will. And there's a time and place for all that. You can still be a man or a woman or whoever you are, and there's different facets to you. There's different faces to you. It's not that you're not being true to yourself, but through experiences, you start to become different. I don't want to say different people because you're all within the same person, but you can pull out those different versions of yourself for the situation. And being a good leader, I'm not saying I'm the best leader in the world, but with any one person, the situation calls for someone different. So you could be the stern, you know, whether you want to call it asshole, bitch, whatever you want to call it in that moment. And then like with the same person, maybe like an hour later, you find out they're going through a divorce or something, like, oh, let me pull out my compassionate
Right.
side and talk to them, and so like, be like a different facet. Because if you're just like one or the other, it's not going to work with anyone. You're not going to be able to achieve the goal that you need to achieve, whatever that goal is.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I mean, it's crazy because if you didn't, more specifically, you're the guest. I want to make it about me. But if you never went through all those things in your life, you would have never become the person, and you wouldn't be able to connect with people with your story. Because if you just had one, like the perfect life, if you will, I don't know if there's such a thing, but you wouldn't be able to relate to people. You wouldn't be able to kind of pull from those experiences and connect with the person.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, I know you share this thought as well. Like everything does happen for a reason, and it sucks, right? Like there's a lot of terrible events that we just, what the fuck's the reason? Like we can't really. It's hard to justify.
Mm-hmm.
But in my own life, like I've felt like there's been times where I'm just put through the ringer, especially like since childhood, right? And it's like, that helps me. That's more of like maybe a coping mechanism. I don't know. But like that helps me keep sense of like make sense of life. It's like, this is but for a long time, it's like, I see the glass half empty. And that's how I've been. Naturally, I think my baseline is a pessimist. But again, like another thing that I thought like, oh, that's just how I am. I'm just trying to be real.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, no, I can be positive. I can look on the bright side. I can use this experience. I can use my life up to this point, and it can either make or break me in a sense. I can continue those old habits, or I can start to see, acknowledge, learn, and grow. And that's where I'm at. It's like everything really does happen for a reason. Like, yeah, I had a rough childhood, but I also had a really good childhood too. Like I didn't get spoiled in toys and like fancy things and all that, but like I'm like, man, like I have a family that loves the hell out of me. I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides, and my grandparents, still, I have all four of them, which is very unheard of for a lot of people. I've met people who've never even known their grandparents.
I've had grandparents and I really didn't know.
Yeah, and I have I say I have three sets of parents. Like my grandparents are like my parents to me, other sets of parents. And they they support the hell out of me. Like my mom, she taught me at a young age that like I feel this. I felt like I've always felt like I can really do whatever I want to do. If I set my mind to it, I know I can do it. And she instilled that in me at a very young age. So while there were some dark times, like, man, like I'm seeing the brighter side of it. Whereas like, and there's a term called the broaden and build theory, in psychology, where naturally we remember more negative traumatic events. They stick with us because of the way that trauma plays a role on the body. Right. It's a lot harder to remember positive events than it is negative. Those negative events are just so like a lot more vivid in our minds. So it's like, as you start to build these like positive reinforcement, we start to like really make it a point to remember those, talk about those positive times. Now we're building a repertoire of positive emotions to go back into when we're faced with like difficult times or stressful events. Like, instead of the trauma, the negative events that's on the forefront, no, we have to broaden and build our positive repertoire so we have something to pull back from. Right. And
yeah, go ahead, finish your thought.
And that's all I was saying is like, yes, like while I had some very difficult times in my military career, I will say that the military opened up doors that I never even knew were possible. Right. As like growing up a Hispanic girl growing up on the west side of San Antonio, you ask my friends, I have like two good friends one good friend who was like, we've been friends since like the 6th grade. And she's like, I never would have thought, like, I never wanted to join the military. Like, so, and let alone like working for 3-letter agencies and working with like foreign nationals, do all the things I've done. It's opened up doors that like I didn't even know existed. Right. You asked me about counterterrorism and like all I knew was like 9/11. You know, I didn't know what, like, I didn't really know what that meant.
Right.
And, like, you know, so it's like, yes, it was fucking hard. But now looking back, it's like, I'm really proud of my career. And not only that, like, I'm proud to be a Hispanic woman, you know, like sometimes, like, I love my culture. I love my family. And while, yeah, I wasn't perfect, I have the ability to take my life up until this point and use it to the best of my ability. Mm-hmm. So now I'm learning to be like, see the glass half full.
Right.
Because I thought, like, no, I'm just a pessimist. Like, that's just how I am. But
right.
I've been called out on it by some people who know me very well. It's like, damn, like, why you gotta be a bummer? And I was like, why do I gotta be a bummer?
Yeah, and it's being around those people that are positive, right?
Yeah.
Jonathan, probably one of the founder from the Dirt Therapy Project, like hanging around him, and he's always like positive. But the mirroring thing that we were talking about earlier, that I noticed when I say certain things, like just as like how was your night of sleep, I got so conditioned in the sense that I had shitty sleep for so many years that, and there are nights where I don't sleep through the whole night. I wake up and sometimes it could be from a bad dream or whatever, or sometimes it could just be I just wake up in the middle of the night, whatever. But I like something like how just like, you know, you get good sleep or whatever, and I'm just like, yeah, it was all right. But it was actually a good sleep, you know, whatever. And it's like I recognize that, and I'm like, why am I minimizing like my sleep or my day? Like, oh, the ride was okay or whatever it was. Like, no, it was fucking badass. Yeah. Like, why do you feel guilty saying like you're having, you know, a positive experience in whatever it is that is? And there's for a number of different reasons. But with that, it's like going back to what you're talking about. And it's like a cliche, right? You got to have like the darkness highlights the light, you know, or like, you know, there's all these different like quotes and sayings that you have to have the dark times to appreciate the good ones. And with that, it is for that, like you came out of this dark place and now you're appreciating it from a different position, a different perspective. And maybe that comes with age, maybe that comes with experience, education, all those in one. But yeah, so I was smiling earlier because when you talked about what was that?
The broaden and build theory.
Yeah. Right before we started this podcast, I saw somebody's story and they talked about something about, I don't remember, I'm going to jack it up, but it was something about focusing on the negative and not the positive. And I replied to the story saying something along the lines of, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I feel that, and maybe I heard this once in, you know, a podcast or whatever. I don't know. Sometimes we say things that we heard before. We don't even realize it. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a primal thing, right? Because the negative experiences, our brain remembers them and focuses on those for survivability. And I don't know if that's what that theory is in regards to, mm-hmm. but it makes sense, right? Like you have bad experience, you know, if when there was a saber-tooth tiger, you had to remember that experience so you can survive and, you know, like live longer. Because if those that didn't, they would die or what have you. So with that, that's still part of our makeup for survivability. Maybe but now in the sense of like where it's like information overload, it's a lot easier for us to like we still have that primal brain, right? And we focus on the negative things, and the more negative, it kind of brings us down because that's what we focus on. So we have to like retrain our brain to a certain extent, not too much, but there's a balance, right, with it to appreciate the negative ones for like survivability standpoint, and then like, you know, obviously emotionally, but also also learn to train our brains, the positive ones, right, to keep that balance. So that's why I was smiling. I was like, that's so crazy because we were just talking about. And
I that's something I just learned in my master's program. You know, that was part of it. We were reading it and like studying it. Like it was all this one Dr. Fredrickson, if anybody wants to learn about the broaden and build theory, Barbara Fredrickson. But yeah, I was like, that makes sense. That's why I'm such a bummer. That's why I'm a pessimist, because it's like, damn, like, no, I don't want to get burned again over and over again. So I'm gonna remember all of the bad shit. The bad shit is right here, and the positive is like, it'll come when it comes.
Right.
But that really made me like try to really change my mindset, and like going back to like being called out on it. I'm like, I asked one of my friends who he called me out on it. He's like, why do you like, damn, you're so negative. And I took it so personal, but I took it personal because it's like, I am negative.
Because it's true.
It's true. And I was like, well, how do you do it? He's like, bro, like, I've been fucking shot at, blown up, like, divorce, whatever, gone through all this bad shit. It's like life's too short. I don't take myself serious. I don't do that. I was like, I looked at him and I'm like, damn, like, I want to be like that. I don't want to, like, I don't want to be high strung all of the time. I don't want to always like dawn on the negative and not see, like, miss out on the positive. And that really made me think, like, dang, like, I don't want to miss out on the, like, all the positive in life anymore.
Right.
And that's why I was like, no, I can change my perspective. I can change, like, it's like the fixed versus growth mindset. That's another really good book, Mindset by Carol Dweck, I think.
I wish I had my pen in front of me. I would write it on here.
But yeah, it's like having that fixed mindset. It was like, this is it. Like, you hit a dead end. It's like, I'm at the dead end. Or you have that growth mindset. It's like, okay, like, let me turn around and go back to where, like, get back on the path.
Right.
Like, I might have hit a dead end, but, there's a way out. Or let me make the way out. And even with that, it's like, I don't know why. I guess I've always felt like it was bad to be positive. Not bad, but like, I felt like, no, it's like, I don't rate to be happy.
Right.
Yeah, I'll say that. Like, for a long time, I didn't think I deserved to be happy. Right? Like, I was just like, I don't deserve happiness. Like, I was dealt this shit hand, and like, I've fucked up. I've been the culprit of like bad toxic relationships, vice versa. It's like, this is just who I am. I don't really deserve to be happy. But it's like, but why not? Like, I started to ask myself, like, why do I feel like this, or like, why do I feel like that? And even like with the property, right? Like, I started staying. Today's Monday. Friday night was like my first night there, and like, but before that, 4th of July was the first time I had seen it, and everybody's been asking me like, what do you think? How do you feel? How do you feel? I'm like, I am so overwhelmed in the best way possible, but it's like, I'm fucking proud. Like, I'm like also talking about like being proud of like your accomplishments, like your house, like things like that. It's like, I worked my ass off to get here, and I never thought this was possible. I never thought this would be possible. My brother and I used to like dream about like owning some property, starting a ranch, like, like we used to talk about that, and like now here I am actually putting it into fruition, way ahead of what I ever like could have ever imagined. And it's like, but it didn't just fall into my lap, It's like, I worked my ass off for this. I worked my ass off for my degree to get into grad school. Like, I never thought I would be getting a PhD, like 10 years in the military. Now I'm signing up for like 5 more years. Like, that's another fucking contract.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm proud, and it's okay to be proud of yourself. And recognize your accomplishments. Like I said this yesterday too, there's that fine line between like confidence and conceit. Yeah. But it's like, but you can still be confident and proud of yourself.
Right.
And seeing that is like, I want to show other people like I said, like I'm a proud Mexican American woman. I love my culture. And it's like, I want to show other people like they can do that too. Like, I looked up the statistic for Latina veteran psychologist, and everything that comes up is like from the VA, like VA resources. There's no statistic to say like that there's a Latina veteran licensed psychologist. Right. And I'm like, I'm sure there has to be one more out there. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But it's like, if I can start to show that like set the way, not set the way.
Trend.
If I can blaze the trail, if you will, like be that trailblazer, then like I want to do that, because it's like, we understand our culture, and we understand the stigmas and the norms that already exist with mental health in our culture. And not only that, like we're veterans, so we understand the veteran culture.
Right.
So it's like, if we have a better understanding and we can start to break down these like generational norms of like abusing alcohol, of like even like that. I don't like to say toxic masculinity, but I know it is a thing, especially
Yeah.
the machismo in the Hispanic culture. It's like, no, we can talk about things and we're not just being dramatic.
Right.
Or we can talk to other people about it and, not like worry about like el mal del envidio. Like, oh, they're jealous. They're going to be jealous of you. You don't want to speak too soon
Right.
about like things. Like, but, it's like, but if we can establish that sense of community again and get back to it and like start to help each other out and like learn about our neighbors, not just like, hey, we need to lock our doors because we need to lock our gates because like these neighbors and these neighbors. But it's like,
Right.
so it's like if we can start to break down those stereotypes, like that's only going to happen with like other members of the community doing
Right.
it. Like, really, do we really want an outsider coming in and trying to tell us how to do things? No. So if I can set that example and show other people that it's like there is a place for you in the community, for other people in the community, that's what I want to do.
That's crazy. I mean, not in a bad way. I gotta find a different fucking word. I need to play more Scrabble or something. No, but I don't ever really think about that, and not in the sense I'm not proud to be a Mexicano or whatever. But I don't think about it from that part. But that is a part of it, right? Like, I guess because again, going back to not thinking too highly of myself or what have you, and I guess there's also like some imposter syndrome going on with me as well. Mm-hmm. It's just like the house, right? We talked about this earlier. You talked about the ranch, but it's like no, and it's kind of like a highlight this morning. I found myself kind of like justifying to others why I live here or I in this neighborhood because I'm not used to it. You know what I mean? And I feel like like what Sandy talked about with the car, like choosing one model or not model, one brand over the other, one make over the other because of the perception that it may when I go back to my neighborhood or what have you. But with that, it's also like understanding, like I guess I understood it to a certain extent, like because it was like if I'm gonna have a platform, what's it gonna be about? I don't want to just be. I don't want to be just one thing. Two, I don't want to just be like talking and with nothing behind it, like no meaning behind it. So my platform, it's a lot of different things. I don't even know what people what they expect or what they see when they see my profile. It's like, what the fuck? This dude does a lot of different shit. But at the same time, it's like who I am. It's like I'm more than one thing. But with that, it's also like one of those things is a Latino, right? And with that, it's like I'm proud of where I came from, and I'm proud of like how I grew up. And like my mom would always talk about like you should be proud, like who you are, never forget where you come from. But with that, there also comes a certain level of responsibility with that, right? And I guess to a certain extent, I really don't get fixated too much on that, not for a positive or negative thing on it. It's not I'm ashamed where I come from. I talk about where I come from all the time, but it's also like I try not to pigeonhole myself too much to it. Because I don't know, there's something within me that I feel like I want to bring people together, and maybe that's one of the reasons for this. It's like not just to highlight the differences, but also the similarities. Because when we get fixated on differences, like we talked about yesterday, that could spur racism, discrimination. Because not knowing is the number one fear that a lot of the stuff stems from. It's also cultural conditioning and stuff like the way people are brought up. But with all that. Yeah, that's not one aspect that I ever thought about, like, because I grew up in the Edgewood district, in the poorest district, you grew up in the same district, the same neighborhood pretty much. It's fucking crazy. Like,
that was crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's like, damn, it's like, Salvo and Jimmy Bowling? Yeah, and like, and it's not, yeah, so it's with all that, I didn't really ever consider that like as me being an influence to our culture, and like, because that's one facet of me, right? So yeah, it's cool to kind of like realize that, I guess, and it just kind of adds to what I'm already trying to do. Like mountain biking, like I grew up in San Antonio for 18 years, and before I left to the military, and this side of San Antonio that I've experienced just through mountain biking is something that I was never privy to because like you talked about earlier. The only place I was very limited in my experiences to like the trail system for one. Like the only thing I knew was downtown, my neighborhood, obviously, going to the ranches my Theo and Theo's had for a little bit, and then like Canyon Lake. That was the furthest I got out. Corpus Christi, maybe, and then one time in New Mexico. But it was very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it was like, it's crazy. I grew up in this city for, 18 years, or actually longer. Like, I'm from here, but I didn't experience a different part of San Antonio, like the trail systems that we have, until I retired from the military. And by happenstance, I bought a mountain bike. And then I started exploring because I was trying to, like, find something to help keep pulling myself out of this dark place. But with that, it's also like, mountain biking was a sport. I mean, it seems unattainable for a lot of people because it is an expensive sport.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I've worked, it's like, it sounds strange for me to say, even saying it. It's like I'm working against myself to say that I've worked to the point where I can do these things, right? But with that, it's also, I understand that there is like a price gap. But with that, it's also like, you don't need a badass fucking mountain bike to explore these trail systems and start to appreciate your city from a different vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, it's like, it's also like, like if I would have had this growing up, like, or at least the experiences or knew this part of town, maybe it would have shaped my life a little bit different. But maybe it would also, I wouldn't have the perspective that I have now and be able to kind of go back to, my neighborhood or like the school or whatever and kind of talk to people. Because like you said, like, they're not going to listen to somebody that looks different than they do. Veterans as well. Like, if in each branch we give each other shit, right? But at the end of the day, like, we understand what our roles and responsibilities were within the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we are able to understand, like, what a deployment is. It may not be the same place, may not be the same experience, but we understand what it is to be in formation, wake up early.
We have common ground.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So with that, it's I guess what I'm trying to say back to you is like, yeah, it's not something I considered before, but it's something I'm kind of going aware of and like kind of owning as part of it going forward. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of highlighting that because it's not something.
Right. And that going back to like the Rustic Ranch motto, it's like horses, veterans, community, and bringing horses, veterans, and the community together. And the South Texas community is 86% Hispanic. So it's like that. We can't fail to recognize that demographic.
Right.
That's not to say, but also the veteran community in Military City, USA. Like the veteran community, like I threw out some statistics yesterday. Texas is the number 2 state for veterans, second to California, and San Antonio alone. I might be butchering this. I think it's number 6, the number 6 city in the nation for veterans. San Antonio, military city. Growing up here, I didn't realize the military presence, but it's like so. While yes, like I'm going to recognize the demographic of South Texas. I'm also recognizing the veteran demographic here, and that's a melting pot, of all different kinds of demographics. So it's like, I also don't want to pigeonhole myself because, while yes, I'm a Hispanic woman, I'm also actually now just starting to like embrace that because, in the military, it was like, it was very much like thrown out. It's like, she's a hothead. She's, just hothead Latina. It's like, she's crazy, like crazy Latina, filling those like stereotypes.
Right.
So it's like, like if I would, one of my good friends today who helps out with the nonprofit, Kim, we met on a deployment. She was in the Navy doing the same job. She's a Latina, I'm Latina. And we instantly like kind of like checked each other because that's what Hispanic women sometimes do. It's like, you cool? And then we became best friends. We've been friends since like 2016. And like, we understood what it was like to be in that white male dominated field and like navigating it was a struggle. And like, but we kind of like, so we understood each other. And her and I talk about this all of the time about just being Hispanic women in the military. Being Hispanic women in a field where like me, like when I first joined the military and being in the intelligence field, they would mistake me for being like supply or admin because that's where a lot of Hispanics were. I was like, no, I'm going to the skiff. Like I'm going to the secured building. I'm this job. And I'm like, oh wow, okay. Because it was like, but I didn't think anything of it. So like, but I also wouldn't like embrace being a Hispanic woman. So now, like, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday too. It's like I'm relearning what it's like to be like a feminine woman, not being like hardcore, having this like strong personality all of the time because it's not going to work all the time. So it's like that's why it's like, yeah, I want to serve my community. This is the community that I grew up in. And exactly what you said is like that community in the west side of San Antonio, and like most people can't, like, maybe they have family ranches, maybe they don't, but it's like owning a horse, like maintaining the care for horse, it's like an average of like $4,000 a year per horse. And the care for, like, that's around the clock care, so it's like not everybody's going to be able to afford that, but the benefits are just like, I can talk about it all day. Like, I get excited talking about like the benefits of working with horses. But it's like, I know like that area of San Antonio might not be able to afford it. So if I can bridge that gap and offer it, like,
right.
I'm going to do the work. That's what nonprofit charity work is.
Right.
Hopefully through like fundraising and donations and like other people who believe in this mission. But it's like offering that to these small rural communities around San Antonio and the low income communities in San Antonio. It's like bringing them and showing them that, like, hey, like, maybe that will spark some interest. Maybe that is something that like shows them, like, hearing our stories shows them like a way out of these communities.
Right.
And that's why it's like, no, I also don't want to pigeonhole. Like, I want to stay as like versatile as I can with this, but if we're talking about like horses, veterans in the community, well, I'm in South Texas for a reason, and South Texas is the Hispanic community, but that's
right.
not all that, that, like, it's not like I would turn anybody away, but I would be doing the community a disservice if I didn't highlight that, like, south of San Antonio is 86% Hispanic.
Right.
So yeah, and that's why it's like I'm rewiring myself, my way of like taking care of myself first, learning how to care for myself, like what actual care for myself looks like the relationship with myself, and then also, like, again, I'm doing all of this because I want to be able to lead by example. I want to show people that I'm doing the work too, because that's, I mean, like, like, it's daily work. It's not just like, oh, I went to therapy, I'm good. Like, no, it's like reinforcing those healthy coping mechanisms, checking myself, making sure I'm like, because I know, like, and the people who are closest around me know when I'm stressed out, and if I'm not managing my stress, so it's like I want to regulate before I get there, and it's like it's a work in progress. Just because I study it, I don't have all the answers, but I'm learning. I'm learning what it works for me, learning what works for other people, and just trying to apply that. And right now, it's kind of just, it's very family oriented, communal. Like, I'm back here in San Antonio. The property is about an hour away of San Antonio and Hondo, North Hondo, right in between Hondo and Bandera, Texas. So it's like, it's networking with people like yourself, other veterans here that are interested in that kind of getting involved and like establishing that community where it's other veterans, it's other Hispanics, it's people of all different walks of life.
Right.
Just learning and growing from each other. Because it's one way, like, one way is not the only way.
Right.
It's hearing those other perspectives, hearing those other experiences, and knowing what doesn't work, and being able to, like, take what you want or take what you can and being able to apply it.
And I love the idea of, like, I know I talked about this yesterday, but so it's, it's like, so a common thread I heard when, and everything you said right there, it's like, you're kind of like finding your baseline, right? Finding like kind of like when you do a systems check, right? You're like, all right, well, what was our baseline before everything got all fucking haywire or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Let's get back to the basics. And the Equine Assisted Therapy is that, right? It's nature, right? We are nature. It's getting back to the roots of what we are and kind of going back to the technology-driven society that we've become. It's very foreign, and it makes sense that we have so many issues when it comes to mental health, because we've lost the connection with where we're from and what we are at the very basis of our being. So you're doing that. You're kind of like, reorienting yourself. Well, now with just the city, you're identifying like, all right, who am I? What am I? And that's like getting to your roots, right? That horses were part of your life growing up. You found your baseline back there, and that was very therapeutic for you. Fast forward, you kind of through life and everything else, we get knocked around in our. If you think of like a dial, right? And our dial is set to, I don't know, let's say 0 is the perfect balance. But then through life, traumas and different things that get knocked off that dial, and then your dial is at like 7 or 8 in one direction or the other. And with that, you're kind of like reorienting yourself to get that dial is back to close to 0. I don't think it'll ever be 0 again, because that's what life is. But at the same time, you're trying to get it at that balance, and it'll get knocked off from time to time through experiences going forward, because that's what life will fucking kick you where it fucking hurts. But with that, I appreciate what you're doing in this sense, and like I think that's the best way to do it, because I don't know if I talked about this at the beginning of the podcast or earlier. Our conversations are starting to run together, but horses were we had direct connection with them before the automobile came around, and then we just kind of like shunned them, and then that became like an elite thing, right? Horses were just like the elitists, they had those connections with it. I don't want to say all people that own horses are elitists, because there are people that, that have horses that still have the connection. They've had it for years. Your family, for example. But with that, it's like getting back to basics on many different levels for you as the better part of your childhood, you finding who you are as an individual, as a woman, as a Latina, like all these different things, right? The positive sides as well as kind of owning all sides of that and trying to like ground yourself. It sounds like you, and I was very honored to kind of for you to invite us out. It was very relaxing. We just kind of walked it. I love being outside anyways. I found, and it's like, for veterans and anybody that were to go visit this place, I'm pretty sure they would see the same thing. It's still in the early stages of it, and I'm kind of excited to be part of it so early on, and the way it happened. We can talk about everything happens for a reason, but with that, I'm excited to see where it goes. And with that, I know you got to go to school for your PhD, and that's going to be like 4 years. So I guess what are your nearest milestones that you're projecting for it, like the stages of the growth of it?
Right. So as you saw yesterday, I mean, it's pretty raw land. There's a lot of brush, a lot of just high grass. So these next few weeks, it's just like cleaning up the land, getting it to the point where I can at least put, like by the end of the summer, 6 weeks, my goal is to have one of the pastures built and bring one horse on, so I can start the veteran horsemanship program in the winter into the spring. So like in the winter, the goal is to start getting like 2 to 3 veterans in the area who are willing to go through the pilot program, is what I'm calling it. Because with this PhD, like my entire dissertation will be centered around equine assisted therapy to treat mood disorders such as anxiety, depression, symptoms of post-traumatic stress, interpersonal communication, and anger management. So with that, it's like I know these methods that already exist. The Agala method, PATH is more for therapeutic riding, and I've seen them. There's some other ones, one offset. They have their own programs. Well, I want to establish my own program as well, and I will be doing the research for that program these next 4 years. I'm going to write my entire dissertation on it. So the goal is to get those 2 to 3 veterans who would want to help me. Like let's talk like what's going to work, what's not going to work from solely the personal development aspect. Since I'm not licensed, I can't diagnose and treat. Mm-hmm. But just working off of, again, like personal development and using my experiences and the veterans' experiences and bridging that gap of like what's going to work. So those are kind of the goals right now up until the end of the year. Clean up the property, get the pasture set up, and starting a fresh herd. So I want to start, like, I want to have my hand on training the horses. And for some veterans, training the horses alone might be very therapeutic. For some veterans, it's just going to be being out at the property. And some, therapy is not a one size fits all. And that's kind of going back. I said earlier about like 6 certain programs, like length programs, 6 to 8 week programs. Like maybe it needs to be a little bit longer. Maybe it needs to be a little bit shorter. It's really just having that initial come out to the ranch. Let's have that initial consult in person, and just going from there. Like, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of it? Or maybe that's just like, hey, I just want to come out here and like do some yard work. That's all I want to do. And then if it happens organically that they want to we want to open up some doors and like explore some actual like points that they want to work on, then it'll happen that way. Mm-hmm. But I'm just very adamant about it being a space where people feel like they can shed those layers. Being very maintaining the integrities. That's what we talked about yesterday. And that's what it's going to be. It's not going to be for everybody. Some people might not like my style of doing things. They want that structure. Just not at a point right now to offer that structure. It's very flexible. It's very just like, anybody who's helping out right now, even like you said, you're a part of the process. Like, yeah, it's people who want to be a part of like the start, laying the groundwork for this. And there are a lot of people who I think like maybe that will help, and some maybe like, hey, like I'll reach out when it's a little bit more established, and that's fine. So the biggest goals right now is, the main one is cleaning up the property, just so it's a little more. It wasn't hard to walk down, but just cleaning up some of the brush, like trimming some trees, clearing out some area. Those are the big things. So the goal is to start to bring on those veterans by the spring. Start kind of interviewing people in the winter, and launch that in the spring while it's still a little cool outside.
Nice.
So those are the goals for the Rustic Ranch up to this point. And a lot of it is going to just be me. Like, also, this is a new, like I've talked about, this nonprofit has brought out identified a lot of things that I need to work on as well. And even like networking, doing something like this is like, this is not like normal. It wouldn't be normal for me, like
it's not fucking normal for me either. Just like
talking, like reaching out, talking to people, and like, yeah. And don't get me wrong. Like, once I'm in the setting, I'm very extroverted, and like I can go up and talk to anybody. But it's making that like the initial contact. It's like, nah. Like, I'm more of like, when I'm there, like people. No, like I'll establish it when I'm there. Kind of now it's like I need to reach out to people to network and get to know people, and that was hard for me, which is crazy, because like if you ask people who know me, they're like, oh no, she can talk to anybody. But it's like, I don't know, I guess like fear of rejection, being told no. But it's like I've gotten to the point to where like what the worst people will probably say is no. I can, and that's like we talked about, like it's really hard for me to ask for help, and I just not noticing it then, I wholeheartedly threw myself into something where all I have to do is ask for help, ask for donations, ask for volunteers, ask like, and it's like, oh my God. Like,
that's how you grow the most, is doing things you're uncomfortable in. And
yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Like, I had somebody tell me the other day, like, you're so good at talking to people. And I'm like, I'm good once I start talking to them. But the intro, like, I go off, I'm learning this about myself. I go off with a lot of intuition. And with that, it's like, if I don't feel if the moment's right or the vibe's right, then I won't force it. So I won't talk to people. But once somebody talks to me, or that icebreaker is kind of, whether somebody else does it or it just happens. Like, usually like writing is when I'm most talkative, or this setting, because I usually establish a rapport prior to. But with that, it's also like, if I'm in my happy place, quote unquote, like riding a bike, or, out, whatever, or out and, working, then I can talk to anybody. But with that, it's and that's part of it, right? Like, to like growing and doing this is something I never thought I would be doing, while in the military, even like growing up, it's crazy. But with that, like, I look forward to trying to help you along this process, and I understand like how it's hard to going out and asking for help, and I appreciate what you're doing, taking ownership, taking accountability, and like identifying the gaps, I guess, and trying to fill them with what you're doing in something that it seems I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be talking to you right now if I felt like you were like, fake.
Right.
I hate to say that, sounds fucked up,
but no, I completely agree. It's like you said like going off intuition. Like, yeah, I used to be really bad. Like I said this yesterday, I used to be really bad. Like if somebody rubbed me the wrong way, and like that was it. Like I just would kind of write that person off. Mm-hmm. Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe I was having a bad day. But now I'm learning to use like that empathetic side, the intuitive side, and like the more self-aware I become and the more work that I do on myself, it's very like in my face, like people's energies, mm-hmm. people's just like body language. So it's like now I'm like, oh, like I see sides of people that maybe they don't see in themselves. And now I'm a little bit more like, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt mm-hmm. to an extent, but I'm still learning, Like, it's okay if I have, like, even with this, like, networking, it's okay if, like, even if you and I didn't have a good phone call at the beginning, like, okay, like, that's just how it's going to go. I'm not going to get along with everybody. Not everybody's going to rub me the right way, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But it happened that, like, yeah, we had a good conversation. We still kept in touch, and like now here you came out to the ranch, and like now here we are, and like it feels very like natural. Maybe maybe it is because like we're raised in a certain environment, like we didn't even know it. But that's why I'm just trying to stay very open. Learning about myself, staying open to just networking, and then like weeding out like who's going to be a good fit, who can I be a good fit for, and who's going to be a good fit for the organization. So it's like not just selling, like not cutting people off, mm-hmm. and it's like, oh no, I didn't like that. But like it's like, okay, like maybe I didn't like that, but maybe we need to just have a follow on, Mm-hmm. So it's like it's gonna take some work for me.
It's definitely gonna be a process,
yeah.
And
yeah.
I think once you identify that good foundation, that core mm-hmm. group of people that are gonna help you move forward in this effort, it's gonna be a lot. I mean, it's like with anything, you're building something, you have to have a good foundation. Because if not, like something can knock it off, but at the same time, it sounds like you're self-aware enough to recognize your own faults and your own weaknesses, and at the same time build on them. And shit, just taking on this effort is huge on its own. But is there anything else you wanted to cover or to go on about, or like not go on about, but talk about?
I mean, for anybody listening, I just want like. Not only the Rustic Ranch is here servicing the greater San Antonio area.
Yeah, I think people in the south side, they say like, "Hey, man, you called us out."
Yeah,
man,
I know. My bad. it's
I think that's the old thing, because we used to, like when I was growing up, we used to talk shit about the south side, and they used to talk, "Oh, you're from the west side, get out of here."
Yeah, same. Or like it's funny because just that real quick, like I never went up to like Alamo Heights, like what now is like the Rim area. Like the quarry area, like no, anything like North San Antonio, mm-hmm. like we just never went there. That was again, like it was like a trip going up there. I remember I used to, when I was in like middle school, I would have to go to UTSA, because I was in this like college prep thing. But like I had to take a bus from General McMullen to go to like the transit station at Crossroads. And then go to like I used to like I was like, what? How old are you in middle school? 13, 14 years old, and I was like, Dad, to take because like my grandma wouldn't drive on the highways. My grandpa was a truck driver, so he wasn't home a lot, mm-hmm. and both my parents worked. Right. So I was like, damn, Mom. I was like, Mom, you let me take the bus all the way up there, and now it's like zoom, zoom, zoom. Like you get to UTSA from the west side, and like. 15, 20 minutes. I can get anywhere in San Antonio. I'm like 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. But needless to say, sorry.
You're good.
We it's the greater San Antonio area that encompasses San Antonio and all of the small rural area. Hondo, Bandera, Poteet, Pleasanton, Floresville, Seguin, like those rural communities as well. Because I do understand like there is a lapse in care. Another thing that I found out recently, Texas ranks last in the nation for mental health resources. As big as the state is, mm-hmm. being the number 2 state for veteran population, and we're last for mental health resources, So it's like, it's going to take some work. I know it's going to take hard work, and
Right.
I'm not going to, I can't do it alone. Like, I know I need people who are interested, who want to do the work. But it's like, this telehealth, it will, again, it'll work for some people. But like, these small pockets of the rural communities of just south of San Antonio, it's like, they shouldn't have to go all the way to San Antonio for care. So it's like, what, and that's long term, you know, but what can we do to start to bridge those gaps in resources? Right. And I'm like, yes, I chose San Antonio because it's my community, it's my home, but like, again, it's also like military city USA. Right. So it's like, not only that, it's like there's a huge veteran population here. So it's like, it's all about bridging that gap. And like, equine assisted therapy is that gap. It's also about networking with the community. So it's like, you know, we talked about other like, if other people are coming and like, we're figuring out what works for them, we're figuring out these people own this business and that business. It's like, oh, well, I might not be able to help you, but I can refer you out to this other, like, you know, being that. So I'm not saying I'm going to do it alone. Right. And equine assisted therapy is it. But with this, like, it's establishing the connections and bringing horses, veterans, and the community together.
Takes a village.
It does. And my mom says that all the time because, again, like, they were really young when they had us, and like, we were with both my grandparents. She'll say this to this day. It's like, yeah, it took a village. It takes a village. And it's getting back to that tribe mentality. Like, it's what's so wrong with, you know, like, talking about like leaning on each other. Yeah. You know, we've become so far removed and very like individual and like isolated to where like, that's fine. Like, I know a lot of people who like also like they leave the military and they're like, nah, I'm gonna go get my 25 acres, and you know, and that's it. That's where I'm gonna be. I'm more like, and that's fine. That's cool too. Like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like there's nothing wrong with leaning on each other and like asking for help. Right. And hell, like, that's crazy that I'm saying that because I had that vision. Like, my brother and I were talking about that ranch, not for this shit. Right. Yeah. We were talking about it like, no, it's for us. Like, for just like, that's going to be ours. It'll be for our family, and that's it.
The same thing with me. When I retired, I didn't want shit to do with the military or anything with it. And that was, I mean, I'm coming around, but it was just like these things started happening, and now I'm doing this, and it's just, it's funny the way things work. But, you know, I believe it's all, you know, for a reason, and it's our, it sounds crazy to say, but it's like our calling, our purpose, or whatever that is. But with that, like, so how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so Instagram, that I think that's been the main avenue of communication. It's our handle is at Rustic Ranch TX, and we're on Facebook as well. You can Rustic Ranch Equine Assisted Therapy.
Yeah, I know.
Rustic Ranch Equine Assisted Therapy on Facebook, and then through that, our email. I've had some people email me. In the website as well. So if you go on Facebook or Instagram, it's directly linked to our website and the email address.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So yeah, and then I do have some help managing that. So you might more times like it might be me or it might be Kim, or like as I'm starting to grow, especially as I'm going to be in this doctorate program, I'm going to need somebody else to kind of be the go-to. And that's also something new to me, you know, like sharing the load. And honestly, and that's pretty much it. Like, you know, reach out to us, like send me an email, reach out to me on Instagram. Now that I'm in I'm here at the property these next 6 weeks as well. Like, it's all about community networking and involvement. So this would be the best time to contact me, 'cause I'm going to be like, that's what I'm doing this before I start the program, my doctorate program. I'm trying to be fully immersed in like getting involved with the community as well. Right. So it would be a perfect opportunity. And even anybody who's like local to San Antonio who kind of wants to help clean up the property, help come out and see the property. Like this is a very unique stage because like we kind of talked about, like this is the rawest it's going to be right now. Like, if you guys were out there, it's like hopefully in the best way, like the next time you guys go out there, it's only going to continue to like grow.
Right.
Like some will be cleared out. We'll have a horse pasture. We'll have the horses. It's not going to be as raw as it was, like as you saw it yesterday. So it's only going to continue to grow. So it's a unique opportunity for people who want to get involved. You know, I even talked about like, I can't be the only therapist either. You know, I'll run into a lot of conflicts of interest of people I know growing up in the area. Like I can't treat my friends and family.
Right.
So it's like also for an opportunity for other therapists who may want to expand into the equine assisted therapy world. Like, you know, it's like, hey, like this is the time to get involved. Not to say that it like opportunity. No, it's only going to continue to grow, but this is the time to see the very raw stages of it and help mold. You know, like I know my vision is not the only vision. Like I said, I love feedback. I love like thoughts. Like, oh, like what do you think about it? Like this is my vision, but doesn't mean it's the only one. So it's like, yeah, it's like I'm very appreciative of suggestions and feedback and
Constructive.
Constructive.
Don't be an
feedback.
asshole.
Yeah, don't be an asshole. Constructive feedback on like what may or may not work. And that again, like as we talked about, like the pilot program that I'm trying to launch in the spring, that's that's something that like I'm gonna try to look for. I gotta write down like things like I'm looking for specific veterans with specific experience and interest to help me mold this program.
Got you.
So that's definitely something that I will be pushing out right now. The main efforts are fundraising. And that, again, it's hard because I got to ask for, like, hey, like, how do I ask people for money? Like, how do I ask people for help?
Well, hopefully this, like, by sharing this, we'll hopefully get the right people to get involved, whether it be volunteers, whether it be donors or supporters or sponsors, and also therapists, you know, or like veterans that are interested in equine assisted therapy.
Bam.
Woo! It only took fucking 2 hours or whatever, how long we've been talking. But yeah, so if anyone is interested in this, you can reach out to Nina and through the resources or the email or Instagram. And be patient because she does have a lot on her plate, so she will get back to you within time, either her or her assistant Kim. So if you have any questions, if you want to ping me, ask me any questions on it, I can give you my perspective of what I thought of either the place or Nina or what have you. I can help you with that as well. But please look her up on Instagram, and you can say it again. And I'll put it like a little link, and then also in the description of where to reach her at via email or through the Instagram page.
Yep, at Rustic Ranch TX.
There you go. And Equine Assisted Therapy. I just want to make sure it wasn't a...
You're like, not a fluke.
Yeah. I'm going to fucking keep practicing afterwards. But
yeah,
but thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And for those of you guys listening, please listen to us either on Spotify or it's streaming everywhere. This YouTube will be on the YouTube channel as well, Crash and Chug. Check us out. I just created an Instagram page for it, so I'm still working. I'm doing a lot of different things at once. So please be patient, and I'll try to keep more content coming and bring good people on, such as Nina, and just try to keep this information flowing and get these resources out there for those that are in need of it or want to start helping out with it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This is a cool opportunity.
Nice.
It's something that, I want to open the door to do more of. And this was a really good start. Like I said, you did a really good job of establishing the rapport before, so this was an easy conversation.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and I'm getting better at it as well. I'm trying to figure it out as I go along, just like you are. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Apparently, I can't even fucking say equine assisted therapy, but now I got it.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Bam.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate it, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.